Okay, so the journal prompt was pick any character in Mark Twain's work and explain how he or she is changed by his or her experiences. But Miss Palma did commend me on my rhetorical flair, though, and that's got to count for something. So my work was made up. My rents would be getting the dreaded phone call from Miss Galley. I could stay in All City as long as I as and it looked as though my school worries were over. But who are we kidding here? Nobody wants nobody knows how to get slapped down by fate like Stephen Elper. Just when things were turning around, I got the flu. Big whoop, right? Sweat, a little barf, lie in bed, watch videos all day while the rents wait on you hand and foot. Not bad deal overall. However, if you have a brother with leukemia who needs to avoid exposure to viruses, you can't be in the same house as your parents when you have the flu. So, just when I need my parents the most, in my deepest hour of need, intestinal crampage, they ship me off across town to visit my grandma and grandpa. Now, I love my grandma as much as I love anybody, and my grandma's all right too when she's not dusting around me every 5 minutes or nagging about my posture. But their house is, to put it mildly, primitive. Do they have a VCR? No. DVD player? Nope. CD player? Negatory. Computer? No. PlayStation? It was like my parents had sent their diseased eldest child to Siberia. I spent the total of 8 days in that glorified hut, but I mostly just slept the first few away. The last 5 were the problem. How many games of Go Fish can a normal 13-year-old boy play with his grandma without suffering permanent brain damage? Hopefully the limit is more than 17 in a row I played with mine. How long can the same normal boy talk with his grandfather without running out of meaningful things to say? The answer to that is 4, if the boy is essentially comatose for the first 3 of them. How weird does my grandparents' house smell, by the way, once my nose started to clear up? Day 5, my nausea got worse because that odd aroma from old pot roast mixed with mothballs was nobody's idea of a stomach soother. Speaking of pot roast, I had spent the 3 months before this involuntary visit subsiding only by a combination of my wits and the microwave. You would think that this week of having actual food prepared by a human cook would be welcome change. However, despite that lingering meat fumes, my grandmother never fed me anything other than bananas, rice, applesauce, and toast, in consideration of my illness. Grrr. It got so bad that I actually spent hours lying on the couch watching Grandma knit, plotting ways to sneak into the kitchen and steal some meat. How pathetic is that? A week with grandparents, and I was desperate enough to contemplate a vile crime of beef felony. Another few days, and I would have probably gotten scurvy or goiter or something. There's some good things about that week, though. The lack of school attendance comes to mind as the biggest treat, although I was worried about having more makeup work to do and about my failing grades. I got lots of phone calls from my mom and Jeffrey, and they even dropped off stuff my grandparents' mailbox for me. The nicest one was a present from Jeffrey and a note my mom must have told him how to spell. Dear Stephen, I'm sorry you got so sick. I sent that medic to help you get better. When he gives you a magic flu blaster shot, make sure you think strong, no flu thoughts. Dr. Perot said that's important. Also, mommy and daddy told me that you sound like you're about to die. If you promise you will get better instead of dying, I promise I will too. Your pal, Jeffrey Alper. Good thing he put his last name on there, huh? I also got some surprise phone calls. I guess my parents were giving everyone my grandparents' number in hopes that they would all call and save me from slow, agonized death by malnutrition and gin rummy. And that called me twice. A couple of guys from school left messages, and Mr. Watrous and Miss Palma each called once. It was exceptionally strange talking on the phone with with teachers. I mean, I was lying there in a ratty sweatpants amidst a vast sea of soggy tissues. I couldn't have been a pretty mental picture. Mr. Watras asked me whether I was practicing, and I told him I was practicing my tissue basketball skills. Then I got all embarrassed. I mean, I know teachers are people, or at least most of them are, but you don't usually talk with them exactly like you talk with everyone else. Still, any call that got me away from watching All in the Family and Golden Girls with Grandma for the third straight evening was an A-OK call in my book. By the end of the week, I was still kind of hurt by the fact that I had been exiled. I mean, I knew exactly why it had to happen, but I still gets to you when your brother is all cozied up at home with both parents and you're sucking down applesauce with mahjong crowd way across town. I wanted attention from the rents and I wanted it big time. Also, I was having these bizarre dreams about hunting down wild game with my bare hands. I had to get back into a diet with some protein and fast. So that Sunday, I bade farewell to my grandma and got into the huge cruise ship that is my grandpa's car for a ride back to my actual life. But silly me, I was forgetting that I didn't have an actual life. Thus, when we got home, the banners and flags and tumbling cheerleaders that should have been lining the curbs to celebrate my return were notably absent. In fact, my parents and Jeffrey weren't even home. I got the ritual crushing handshake from my grandpa. See you soon, muscles. Let myself in, staggered into the kitchen so I could consume heaping quantities of life-saving meats and cheeses, or in the case of our barren wasteland in the refrigerator, 3/4 of a thing of yogurt and a half of a microwave bean burrito. Then I booted up the computer to see how many people had emailed me to check whether I was okay. I had 17 new messages, which looked promising, but 11 were just spam, which would have been great if I was seeking a cheaper mortgage or a way to lose that weight fast. I was looking for a bit of human contact and sympathy at the moment, so I went right to the 6 that were from actual people I knew, and they all said basically the same thing. Oh my God, you've been absent for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and you're never absent. Is Jeffrey all right? He's in my prayers. We miss you all. Frowny face. In case my friend's grammar and punctuation weren't upsetting enough, the fact that nobody thought there might be a problem with me was enough to blacken my mood pretty thoroughly. I stormed over the couch and called one person who I gradually, without me noticing it, became my confidant. Annette. Hey, I'm home. That's great. You all better? We missed you in jazz band this week. Every teacher asked me about you, and some girl was pretty curious about where you were, too. Who? Oh, somebody. Annette, I'm not in the mood to be tortured right now. Would you please tell me? I'm not sure about this, Stephen. Is your heart might not survive the strain if you not fully recovered? Annette. Okay, I'll give you a hint. She wears very tight shirts that you drool over like a deranged monkey boy. What? What are you talking about? I don't drool over Renee like a deranged but you knew what I meant right away, didn't you? On one hand, Renee continued to show remarkable, if sudden, interest in me. On the other hand, grrr. What was Annette's problem? We talked for a while more until she got called to dinner. Veal parm. Evidently, there still existed an abundance of animal-based food if one knew where to find it. And if one was just too pathetic, forlorn, and unremembered, one could always scrounge up some decade-old generic canned fruit cocktail from the depths of the basement pantry. I was sitting at the kitchen table alone, picking out the cherries from various beige floaty things, which made up 93% of the fruit cocktail, when my family returned, laughing at some private joke that they had shared during my week in lockdown. Jeffrey looked at my parents for approval, and when my mom nodded, he launched himself into my lap. I thought I'd never see you again. Why? I just had the flu, but Mommy said you were, I know, dying, but I wasn't dying at all. and now I'm fine. Then Mom piped up, "Oh, Stevie, it's great to have you back. Hey, you noticed I was gone. What was the big clue that gave it all away? Stephen Alper, what has gotten into you?" An ensuing fight was not so entertaining for anyone concerned. Although Jeffrey giggled when I said Grandma was a demented, child-starving hag. Dad may have found some truth there too, but he wasn't dumb enough to jump into the raging battle, so he took Jeffrey off the field of combat and up to bed. Without an audience, Mom and I wound down pretty fast. Without any kind of resolution, I just kind of tapered off and walked away and went downstairs and played on my practice pad. At first, my wrists were rusty after more than a week off, but I gradually warmed up and was playing pretty blazingly fast and much harder than usual. When I got too tired, I stopped for a while and listened to blasting punk music on my Discman. Then I went back to the pads again. I must have been down there banging away for a couple hours. I was trying to stay hidden until everyone else went to bed, so I wouldn't have to deal with anyone. Finally, I decided the coast was probably clear, so I tiptoed upstairs. Nobody was sleeping yet, as it turned out. My family hadn't necessarily been having an excellent week. I had been imagining so resentfully. I could hear noises from the bathroom upstairs, Jeffrey vomiting and my mom trying to soothe him. I also saw something shocking. Right in front of me at the kitchen table, my dad slumped over a pile of papers with his head cradled in his hands. He was crying.